Blake says the terrorist attacks were clearly a carefully orchestrated attack. He says America must send a clear message that this attack will not be tolerated. Congressman Jim Colby says the U.S. would commit every resource necessary to bring the terrorists to justice. The carnage in New York and Washington has snarled border crossings between the U.S. and Mexico. The U.S. Customs Service says all along the 2,100-mile border are open, but long waits are reported. Some cars waited an hour and a half to get into the U.S. at the border crossing across from El Paso, Texas. And similar security checks created massive traffic jams all along the border. Updating Tucson weather tonight, mostly clear, a low in the low 70s. Tomorrow, partly cloudy, a chance of afternoon thunderstorms, high in the upper 90s. Currently, skies are mostly clear. The temperature is 96 degrees on the campus of the University of Arizona. For KUAZ News, I'm Nelson Warnell.
From NPR News, this is special coverage of today's terrorist attacks on U.S. targets. I'm Robert Siegel in New York.
In Washington, I'm Linda Wertheimer.
And I'm Noah Adams. This has been a day of almost indescribable devastation, starting with the morning hijacking of two jets that were steered into two towers of the World Trade Center in New York. Those skyscrapers were totally destroyed by the attacks. No one can say how many hundreds or thousands of people may have died. Shortly afterwards, another hijacked plane crashed into the Pentagon in Northern Virginia. Both Washington and New York were nearly shut down by the terrorist assaults. Tonight, President Bush addressed the nation.
Today, our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature. And we responded with the best of America, with the daring of our rescue workers, with the caring for strangers and neighbors who came to give blood and help in any way they could. Immediately following the first attack, I implemented our government's emergency response plans. Our military is powerful, and it's prepared. Our emergency teams are working in New York City and Washington, D.C. to help with local rescue efforts. Our first priority is to get help to those who have been injured and to take every precaution to protect our citizens at home and around the world from further attacks.
President Bush speaking this evening from the White House.
We turn now to NPR's Melissa Block, who is about as close as you can get tonight to the World Trade Center. Melissa, where are you and what do you see?
I'm standing on the West Side Highway, which is just north of the World Trade Center. It's where the emergency services have set up their vehicles and where when there's calls for them to go in, they're going in. I just saw a procession of earth-moving equipment and large cranes go in, about 3 bulldozers and 2 huge cranes. I've heard that they're going to try to move some of the rubble in the vehicles from the area. There are a number of firefighters here who I've been talking to who were down there putting out fires. Described, it's been a little confusing about what actually is left of the Trade Center towers. They were 110 stories tall, and they collapsed, obviously, this afternoon, earlier this morning. The firefighters who I spoke to who were on the scene said that they are now reduced to about 5 or 6 stories of rubble.
Certainly much smaller than what they were. There have been reports that first wave of emergency workers that went into the World Trade Center, firefighters, police, that there could be hundreds of them lost now and unaccounted for. What do you hear about that?
That's right. That's the concern here, and those numbers we still do not know. I talked to a National Guard a member of the National Guard from Dover, New Jersey, who had gone in, sitting on the sidewalk, completely shaken. He said he'd never been in combat before, but this is about as close as he can imagine getting. He was down there trying to pick through the rubble to find any survivors. They did find some. This was early on today. People probably who had been outside the building. He was hearing cries for help. He described a woman whom they had found who was completely covered in blood. She did not remember her name. He said she was half naked, stripped of her clothes in the course of the blast. And you see just wave upon wave of firefighters. You might hear some applause right now. Those are Salvation Army volunteers who are applauding the firefighters who are trudging from the scene, caked in debris. Their heads are bowed. They're carrying axes and picks. This has obviously just been a tragic police department.
Melissa, what is the air like there? Is there still that terrible cloud hanging over Lower Manhattan?
There is, all over the southern Manhattan. You just get the strong stench of acrid smoke that's everywhere. After the 2 main towers collapsed later in the afternoon, there was the collapse of another building at the Trade Center. There are also any number of smaller fires fire department has been putting out cars that were set on fire, other buildings that have been set on fire down there. I mean, it wasn't just obviously the two towers, but surrounding buildings that were affected by this, and the whole area is just still thick with smoke.
The president's message earlier this evening was that America reopens for business tomorrow. It doesn't sound like the financial district reopens for business tomorrow.
No time soon. I mean, this is just I can't begin to describe, and obviously I haven't been there to be able to describe it, but the people who have been in there and are describing what they've seen said you would not recognize it. It just did not look anything like what the tip of Lower Manhattan used to look like.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks, Robert.
NPR's Melissa Block reporting from Lower Manhattan, from the West Side Highway, close to the World Trade Center.
Of the 4 planes hijacked today, 1 did not reach the hijackers' intended destination. United Airlines Flight 93 from Newark to San Francisco crashed outside Pittsburgh. There were 45 people on board when the jet slammed into a grassy field. NPR's John Itzty is about a quarter of a mile from the crash site in south-central Pennsylvania. It's about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. John, I understand the FBI are there at the site now. What sort of work is going on tonight?
Well, tonight, they're just gridding out the area, but not doing any real searching. The NTSB arrives tonight. Tomorrow morning, they'll go over the area very carefully, trying to find evidence and remains. Hopefully, they'll find the flight data recorders and the flight voice recorders, and that they'll tell us something about what actually happened on Flight 93.
John, is there any area, this is an area of speculation, I know, but is there anyone talking about where this plane, where the hijackers could have been wanting to take this particular plane?
Well, there's speculation. Obviously, it wasn't in this field. There's certainly nothing of great symbolic importance there. It's not the heart of capitalism. It's not the headquarters of the U.S. military.